lot of familiar faces. As a matter of fact, just about everybody's a familiar face. So great to see it. Appreciate everyone coming up here. So again, for those that is a little bit new, this is a great discussion. We share, we have good ideas, and if people don't volunteer, I'll voluntold you. So great to have everybody. So thinking about disruption, it happens pretty regularly. Maybe when we think about disruption, let's maybe first define it. So as a leader, what do you guys think of? What is something that you think of as disruption in your business? Let's go with Deanna. You've had plenty of disruption lately.
Oh, did we ever?
Yeah.
Um, One of our biggest disruptions was, and how it disrupted our organization was the lack of being able to get revenue in timely.
Mm-hmm.
Generate, we were able to generate revenue and provide services. We weren't able to get paid for those services. And that was a huge disruption for us.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing worse than having a bunch of outstanding bills that haven't been paid yet.
Yes.
Yeah, that's no fun. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking at a higher level. Let's just define disruption. And then the second thing we'll talk about is maybe some sources of disruption. But as a general definition, a high level definition, what do you think of when you think of disruption? Jordan, how about you?
Well, an example would be going through COVID. That was very disruptive for our
Yeah.
business. Um, but typically, disruption, if I were to think about it in a broader term, is something that forces us to react, something that shifts our expectations or shifts our activities.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it in a broad sense of disruption is anything that changes the way we think about our business or what we're working on, whether it's, a business sense or a personal sense. Yeah. Disruption is anything that kind of causes us to change our thought process. So let's just talk a little bit before we get into like how we lead through some of these disruptions. What are some sources of disruption? And we've had a couple already. COVID was definitely a source of disruption. That definitely changed the way we have to do a lot of things. Diana, in your example, like what caused that disruption? What caused you think people to not pay their bills in a timely manner?
Cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's been happening a lot. What else? What are some other sources of disruption out there?
Mm. Other people.
Yeah, other people. Give us an example, Amelia.
I mean, anytime you're working with others, either on a project or, maybe even external people, they may or may not be in line with what you have planned. And so when they deviate, as we do with our human behavior, that may force you to change course.
Yeah, yeah. People not doing what you expect them to do. That can definitely be a disruption.
I've got two that come to mind, Ken. One of them is competition.
Mm-hmm.
We're experiencing that across our customer base is aggressiveness in our competition. And then the other one might be a good thing. It's technology. So as I think about disruption, artificial intelligence is disrupting the way that we do business, our customers do business. Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology, specifically AI is a huge disruption in the business place right now. Yeah. Frank, how about you? What's an example you can think of a good source of disruption?
Well, so I'm like with Jordan in that disruption by competition, and what comes to mind, and it's not affecting me necessarily, except for I recognize it, and we're pursuing those things, is business disruption through the competition, like Uber did to the taxi services,
Hmm.
and I'm reading a book right now called Blue Ocean Strategy. So it talks about the red ocean, which is where all the sharks are eating each other, and then the blue ocean, which is where there's no competition necessarily, but as a result of new business in a space where you don't have competition, it impacts the business sector, and we see that all the time. And that's like If you look at Wells Fargo back in the 1800s, and then all of a sudden this guy Ford comes along and makes automobiles and makes, a lot of what they did obsolete. So that's a disruption, an old form of it, but it's been around a long time. So
Yeah.
how we have to deal with that and manage it strategically is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, how about let's see, is it pronounced Yana? Is that how you pronounce it correctly?
That is correct. I was just thinking about sometimes you can be your own disruption.
Mm,
You can get sidetracked yourself by multitasking. You can have a lot of things on your plate, on your mind, and you can just get disrupted just within yourself. So that's what I was thinking, more of a source of disruption.
no, I love it. I love it. Veronica, how about you? What are some sources of disruption you can think of?
I think right now my biggest one, of course, is staffing. Getting
Mhm.
enough people to do the jobs that we need to do can absolutely disrupt your day.
Yeah, or somebody just up and leaves, or a lot of things like that. You're absolutely right. Our people
Mhm.
changing of personnel could be a huge disruption. People, whether through retirement or to get a new job, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, you have this. What are we doing now?
Yeah, we're back filling and trying to fill holes.
Yeah, so changing personnel definitely can be a good source of disruption. See if I got anything else that came in there. We hit technology. How about changing your leadership? Anybody gone through an organizational change in leadership recently? Jordan, I know you have.
Yes, sir.
Renee, what about you? You got any big changes in your leadership? Yours is a foreign company. Do they change in and out, or do you get pretty consistent leadership?
I think they just changed. Uh, yeah, they just changed our leader up there in Taipei. They just changed them
Yeah.
and the riff. So, so we're just going through a riff too. So,
Oh yeah. We're just talking about people.
all
That
kinds of changes and
all kinds of
distractions
changes
going
in
on.
structure and disruptions going on from riffs and stuff. Yeah.
Yes,
Um, but,
indeed.
but yeah, leadership changes, changing priorities, changing methods, just changing personality sometimes can be awfully disruptive. Anyway, in a highly regulated industry, I know Deanna, you're in a highly regulated industry.
So
You know,
true. We depend on so much of the business that we do depends on federal regulations, and those are changing every day. Then you also have to remember there's payer challenges that come along based on those changes, and then they have their own changes as well. So regulation changes is a big disruptor for us.
yeah, that can be for anybody. In government, again, government changes can have huge impacts on us. Talent, Veronica kind of hit that one. Our talent changes people, whether we're getting new people in that can do new things, or we lose people that we're used to doing things. Deanna kind of hit this one a little bit. Cybersecurity is a huge deal. I was talking with a gentleman, and he worked for the city of Atlanta, and basically they got hacked, and like the entire city of Atlanta's infrastructure they were essentially locked out of it. Schools, police, traffic. I mean, you name it. They were dealing with a massive attack. So yeah, things like that can have a huge impact. But so far Jordan kind of hit on a little bit on some of these things. What are some positive things that come? What are some positive outcomes from disruption?
Kenny, this is Joe. I'm going to throw one out that so many times we get comfortable with what you're doing. When you're married for a long time, you don't want to change anything. When you get divorced, like everything is possible. And I deal with this regularly where I have upstream vendors for my office coffee service where they're like, well, we're on back order for 3 months. Okay, it forces me to actually look elsewhere. And I'm like, oh my God, if I had considered this earlier, I could have saved, I could have enhanced the margin on that SKU by 6 percentage points. Like, why didn't I do this sooner? So sometimes it could be a very, very good thing. But initially you're like, oh crap, now I got to go find somebody else that does this. Do they have in the right quantities? It's painful initially, but as the long-term potential can be pretty accretive.
No, I love it, Joe. Thank you very much. That's a great example. Yeah, it creates new opportunities and new solutions. What else is a positive outcome of disruption?
I would say improvement in collaboration. When things happen, like take COVID, right? That was a huge disruptor around the world. And companies shifted, they pivoted. And so now, they've been able to reduce their footprint. Not everybody is back, 5 days a week in the office, which really affects their bottom line because they reduce costs.
Yeah, we get better sometimes because of that disruption. The changes that it forces in us are good things. Yep. What else?
It forces it enforces or it forces you to look at process improvement. Where can we align to better our processes based on the disruptor?
Yeah.
So whether it be, cybersecurity, regulatory changes, it's just a constant looking at your workflow processes and looking for improvements to make to build
Yeah.
a system of way of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like, forced improvements.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I don't want us to think here as leaders that disruption is always a bad thing. It's always a challenge, but the end results can be pretty positive. Let's see if I got anything else on there one. Yeah, innovation. We think of things we wouldn't have otherwise thought of. Oh yeah, I didn't think about doing that. You know, One of the other things that it often does is it will reveal opportunities that we didn't know were there. Joe's was a good example on that. But the other thing, just from a personal perspective, when COVID hit and we started doing a lot of things virtually, we realized, well, wait a minute, this actually works pretty good doing it this way. This is a good way to do this. A couple of you in here have done the Energized Elite. I started doing that in a virtual setting, and I can get a lot more people a lot faster, a lot easier, and I can spread that value easier. So it definitely reveals some opportunities and things and some things we didn't think we could do before. What else? Yeah, let's talk a little bit about resiliency. How does it build resiliency?
I can talk to that one, Ken.
Please, Frank.
When I was at Fujitsu, we had a hard drive manufacturing plant in Malaysia. It was taken out by a flood. So one of the things the company did, it was huge impact. So they looked at how they could diversify that manufacturing process globally, bought out Siemens, and now we manufacture hard drives in 3 different places across the world for resiliency and continuity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely one of those undesirable, but in the end worked out but it's just probably extremely expensive and probably pretty painful till you got the other ones up and running. Yeah.
I can add to that too.
Yeah.
Like I said before, we're going through a RIF, and my location's going from 150 people to 20.
Ooh.
So pretty significant. But the resiliency is, and I'm affected as well, voluntarily, but it's allowing me to move on and to do, what I want to do. Right. So I'll be having my own coaching and consulting business. And I had been working on that anyway as a side hustle. So now I get to do that full time and to service people that I want to service at a high level.
All right. We won't do this today, but you and I are going to have a conversation.
So just that resiliency.
We need to talk. Love it. Love where you're going. Know what you're doing already. We need to talk. We won't do that here. We'll set up a separate time.
No. But yeah, I mean, all of our people have to be, resilient. They're going out there, and I'm hearing that they're getting jobs, and it's kind of opening up their eyes because some people were born and bred here. So now they're seeing like, oh, I can use this skill that I haven't used before. So it's a blessing in disguise for people.
Yeah.
So they're being resilient.
Yeah. We can get buried by these changes and these disruptions, or the growth we get from them helps us out immensely. It's sometimes not necessarily like using the word complacency, but sometimes we just get overly comfortable and this
Sure.
disruption causes a change in us, and we recognize that, well, maybe we're a little bit more capable than we think we are. Maybe I don't need to look for the same job I had. Maybe I need to be looking for the boss of that job.
Mhm.
So we think and see it ourselves a little bit differently sometimes. But yeah, we definitely get tough, and grit a lot along that resiliency, just that perseverance and that gutting it out, and that not letting it beat us down. I think one of the other things is that it allows us to learn that disruption, if we look at it and see it as a signal to change versus a threat to avoid, our attitude towards it is important. If every time something's going bad, we're like, oh man, the sky is falling, like, oh no, or look at it like, okay, all right, let's figure out what we can do with this. It can help us mentally and emotionally, see that easier and see that better. You know? Amelia, I mean, think about that. You went through a pretty good sized change, not necessarily voluntarily at first, but everything that I've heard so far, you love where you're at now, and I'm sure that the process to get there was not fun. Same thing, kind of you and Deanna both gone through similar experiences, but share just real quick on how that impacted you in a positive way.
Well, I like to say, and I've said this for years because I was laid off many, many years ago, and then again a year ago, almost exactly to the day. And both times they ended up being some of the best changes in my life. They facilitated some of the best changes. It taught me my job skills that I use every single day today. It's that change that allowed me to meet my husband, which changed, I mean, everything about my life. And most recently, I completely changed industries,
Yeah,
and I absolutely love it. And, I would never choose change, these significant changes voluntarily. And, my former boss, is terrified to leave. And, he's asked before, is the grass really greener? But we naturally resist change, but it can turn into some very unexpected, very wonderful things.
yep. No, I had dinner with Amelia and her husband, and the thing stuck out of my mind is, best wife ever, for a couple things. So yeah, so a lot of those things really, if we learn to change our attitude towards them and recognize that, okay, we can work through this. Yeah. So now we really start thinking about, what disruption is. We've talked a little bit about some of the sources of it, some of the positive things, but what are some of the key things that we as leaders need to really think about and implement and execute well as this disruption is going on? How do we lead through it better? What are some thoughts?
You have to have excellent communication
Yes.
and check in with your people's well-being, whatever that is, because everybody processes change differently.
Yeah,
That's what I would
I
say.
don't disagree with any of that. We'll cover a little bit on that here as we think about this. We'll come back to that here in a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah, what else?
I'd say
Yeah,
that we,
yeah, Chris.
trying to have people focus on the areas that we actually can control, and not
Yeah.
in trying to eliminate some of the noise. I think sometimes we can get wrapped up in our own heads with that, and of how it can be detrimental to us. But if we focus on the positive aspects of it and focus on the areas that they actually can, have influence over, then we can kind of push forward.
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm coaching somebody and they're frustrated about things that are kind of outside of their control, I like thinking about three concentric circles. And in the first, you got this small circle, and those are the things that you have some control over, and things that you can influence, things you can actually make decisions about, things you can actually change. And you got like a medium-sized circle, and that's the things that you can influence. And you don't control them, but you can have conversations, you can have engagements, there's things that you can do about it. And then like all of the rest of the world out there are things that you have no control over. And And I encourage people to, number one, you know, don't stress about the things that you can't control. But I also encourage people is don't put things in that bucket too soon. Sometimes we just put things in that bucket as an excuse because we're scared or don't want to do anything or afraid of it. And we just say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Well, maybe not. But, so don't put it in that bucket too soon. But if it's in that area, in that circle, yeah, let it go.
Ken, I want to tap into what Renee had said a few minutes ago about
Yeah,
how
please.
uh, touching bases with people and trying to get them to feel comfortable with the change. I remember when COVID did hit in our office here in the state, we had to immediately abruptly change everything so quickly. And so everybody was like, oh, we got to get equipment here. We got to get this here. We still had to still function fully as if everything has never happened. But as a state, we had to change very quickly. And our director, he constantly, every week on Mondays, he will always check in with the staff. We had a staff over 100 employees, but he made it his business to make sure that, first of all, that we were able to maintain in our own homes, in our own personal life, if we needed anything. He thought of that first before work. Then the second thing was basically, is there something that he can do to help our jobs a lot better? So he was helping us with the change and adapting to what we had to do within the four walls of our home, along with your children there trying to do school. And then, everybody's in home during COVID time. So it helped the change for us to continue. So I feel that that is very important, that you connect with your people, to have that open communication, so that you can lead them through whatever necessary changes that we have to do, and you would be able to do it together, and you'll see that positive outward.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is far more than just the conduct of the work that you have to check in with people on. It's how are they doing as a human being, and I think that's critical. Um, a lot of people, they missed that opportunity to say, well, how do I just kind of, I can't just go walk into their office anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but what can you do? Well, I guess I could just pick up the phone and call them. Yeah, you can. I can jump on a Zoom and see them. So I always say one meaningful conversation with every person every week. Yeah, Amelia, what you got for us?
I think during times of disruption, I think it's even more important to, as a leader, to establish and maintain a shared vision, shared outcomes, because it's so easy to get distracted by the disruption. And you could easily get sucked off to one side, and all of a sudden all of your attention is focused on this problem or this side effect. And by really keeping that shared vision or the goal in mind, you can help your team also do that while dealing with the components of the disruption, but still moving forward. And I think it just becomes very, very important in this situation.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is really important, and Jordan, just so you know in advance, I'm going to pick on you here next, is when we think about an organization and you think about, well, what is our purpose? What is our vision? And what are our core values? And the only reason I'm picking on Jordan is because I know his organization has 5 very strong values that they work through and live by. So talk to us a little bit about how we use those, in your instance, those 5 core values that you guys have towards maintaining that focus and not getting overly distracted by the disruption.
Well, Ken, thanks for the heads up that you were going to pick on me.
I figure it's only fair.
You just said something that I was going to bring up as leading through disruption, which is falling back on those values, which is prioritization. You've got to stay true to who you are. So GCC, and in a more broad sense, EOH have 5 core values, and I'll butcher them if I try to tell you what they are verbatim. But at the end of the day, that's our North Star. That's guiding what we're doing day in and day out, how we treat each other, how we treat our customers, how we treat our vendors, which we call principal partners, because they're
Yep.
just as important as our customers, and ultimately how we behave. And that's even more important when you're in a disrupted state, because you don't know which way is up when you're battling through a chaotic time frame. So when you fall back on those values, um, you may not always make the right decisions, but you rarely make the wrong decisions.
Yeah, I like that. You might not always make the right decisions, but you rarely make the wrong decisions. All right, I like that. Yep. And the one that always sticks out to me is, the lightning customer focus. That's one of your values that always sticks out to me when I look at the wall again. And I will say that they do live that, because I am one of those partners for them, and I do feel like a trusted, valued partner, not a vendor. So they're living them well. So here's an interesting idea, and I'm going to put a poll up on here, and thinking about, when things become challenging and stressful, some people go inward, some people go outward. So I'm going to pull this up here, and just as wherever it's coming, I want to see where the kind of the group is. Do you go inward or do you go outward? I got to pull it up here. It's being a pain in the butt on me. There we go. All right. So here's the poll. When you get stressed, is your default to go inward or go outward? Let's see what you got. Oh, the results are getting really skewed. Oh, now they're evening out a little bit more.
This is hard because it depends on the situation.
I know, you got to make a choice though. What's your default? There's no right or wrong. It's just an interesting data point, Mandy. All righty. So let's take a look at that and see what we got going on that. All right. So looks like about 2/3 of the people go inward versus outward. So for some of those who go inward, said they went inward, what are some of the benefits and the challenges of going inward?
I'll chime in, Ken. So
All right,
I
please.
chose inward, but I thought it was more of a inward first and then outwards. Because if there's disruption, I need to get my mind straight on defining the problem, on fully understanding what's going on, what are some potential solutions, and then I go outward and get other people's feedback, other people's thoughts. But if I can't clearly articulate what the disruption is, it doesn't make sense for me to go outwards until I get that clarity.
So if I can push back on you just a little bit, how would involving others and helping you do that benefit you?
Certainly different perspectives are valuable. The different perspectives, you'll see things, or other people will see things that I don't. So there's wisdom in the guidance of others. And so having good people around you to bounce ideas off of, to ask questions openly, honestly, is important. That's one of the things I'm trying to get better at this year.
Yeah. All right. Who else is inward?
I said inward as well, but I was going along the lines of Jordan, just getting your thoughts together first and then reaching out and collaborating with others. But I think the benefits of going inward is so you block out the noise.
Okay.
Right. So that you're focused and you kind of know how you want to proceed. But one of the challenges is you're limited. So you may not, foresee things coming, just like Jordan was saying. But it depends on the situation too, though, because sometimes I'll go inward, but sometimes my default is outward and reaching out to other people to bring them in because, 2-3 heads are better than one, right?
Yep, that's true. But also none of us are as dumb as all of us sometimes too. So who's somebody that said outward? Let's hear from an outward person. Who voted outward?
That would be me.
Yeah.
All right, Deanna.
Yeah, of course. I start thinking out of the box. When we had our cybersecurity breach, we started thinking out of the box. What do we need to do for our client? Where did we need to go for resources? And we started thinking outside of our box of what we do and what is out there in the world that we can provide to our clients. Even in my personal life, I think out of the box when there's a disruptor. Where should I go? Is this going to work? Look at all of my resources around me and think, what can I tap into next? Who can I tap on the shoulder to help me with? So that's me and what we did when we were breached. We thought out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that it's one of those things that it's a fine balance. I think if in Jordan's case, if you're waiting until you have the solution, you've missed a lot of opportunities to involve people, to engage people, to discuss. But I like kind of Renee's perspective on this. I got to get myself straight first before I can engage others effectively. So I think you got to find that right balance. And ultimately, I'm an inward person. I'll own that. When things get tough, I buckle down, I focus, and I just start doing and getting stuff done. And I my default isn't to go outward. Mine is to go inward too. And I've time and time again find that some of the best solutions I have are not when I've come up with a solution, but when I've provided the organization and the people the opportunity to contribute and to figure it out. Because um you know that it just amazes me sometimes that the ideas and what people come up with. So find that balance a little bit. All right. A couple other things we kind of really talked about this one already. Jordan hit it, and a couple others hit it. Focus on that purpose, the mission, the core value. What is it we as an organization are supposed to be doing? Deanna, I think hit that a little bit too. Well, what do we need for our customers? How do we service them right now? Yeah. So, how do we as leaders create a disruptive mindset for people? How do we train them basically when there isn't disruption? How do we prepare them for disruption? What are some things we need to do for that? Let's see here. I don't know if Jason Pope, I'm not sure if you're able to come on, or if you're just there hanging out listening. All right. Not hearing anything from Jason. No worries. Other thoughts? Who else would have an idea? How else we prepare and train our team members for being functional in disruption?
And just my name is known.
I think it really comes down to empowering the people that you work with, that so that they know what they can and can't do, and they can step up in times of crisis and really step into those holes that are created. And if you've taught them well in advance how to do that, there's so much more confidence, and there's so much less disruption, honestly. They just sort of step in, they fill the holes, and away we go.
Yeah. Don't wait till you got a disruptive time to learn those things about them. Yeah, Renee.
Yeah, I was just going to say, providing stretch assignments or opportunities, before crisis time, so that they are comfortable doing that, putting them in there where it's measured. You know what I mean? You're kind of mentoring them, through those types of opportunities.
Yeah. You do it when it's a little bit, safe and there's some controls in it. So, and they get an opportunity. If they make mistakes, then it's, hey, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. And I think a lot of that falls into that. Let's try things. If we're unwilling to allow people to experiment and to try new things, to see, even if it doesn't work, we've still, gained some valuable insight from it. If all we want is just do it this way only, well, that's all they're ever going to be able to do. And when that way doesn't work anymore, we haven't encouraged them to try new things. And I think it goes along with the calculated risk. That's a little bit what Renee was talking about. Do it when it's safe. Let's try this when it's okay if it messes up a little bit. Yeah, Frank, what you got for us?
Hey, Ken. One of the things I was looking for was planning for disruption. Um, if I know that in your experience, you've gone through and worked for the government before. I know that, and I have as well. And one of the things that they're really good at is um, having a plan in place and then doing rehearsals of concepts with your people to manage how you're going to respond to disruptive events. And I went through that with Harris County, both in cybersecurity and elections. And we would do, we would have our planning sessions, evaluate our plan, and then have a rehearsal of concept to figure out, can we really respond to things when they happen? So
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to, you know, and that's something I didn't get in private industry. In government, FEMA has a great program, but I think planning for it is key
Yeah.
because it's going to happen.
Let me tell you, I'm in Middle Tennessee right now in the Nashville area, and there have been people that have been out of power for 12 days right now. The power company did not have a plan for this disruption. They did not rehearse this. They did not figure out, well, where are we clearing roads from, and a lot of other things like that. They're doing some discovery learning, let me tell you. And it's not like we don't get storms every year. We get a storm every year. That's guaranteed to happen. That one in February 4 years ago in Houston. All right, that one was probably a little less prepared for it, and that one was awful too. It was a horrible disruption was that one.
Yeah. I'm just thinking part of your disaster plan, just your fire drills.
Yeah.
Right? Buildings have to have it, 3-4 times a year. And as you know, in HR, you need to make sure your people get out. You need to make sure, who has what regions of the office. So we have to practice. Otherwise, people are not going to know, where's the muster station? They're not going to know that,
Nope.
unless you practice.
Unless you walked out there and yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we think about these things. Hey, what are we going to do? Like Deanna, when they had the cyber attack, hey, what are we going to do if we get attacked and all of a sudden we don't have access to our systems anymore? And now, we're going back and like, what info do we have and where's our backups and are they on a separate system and how can we pull them in? And we're going back to spreadsheets, because we don't have our database anymore or, paper stuff. Yeah. There's all kinds of, crazy thoughts on that, you know, but making, adjustments and kind of cultivating that. Um, I spent a significant amount of time working on offshore projects in the oil and gas industry, and that was a nonstop, constant source of disruption because things were always going wrong downhole. And so everybody got really used to, all right, what do we do? All right, what about this? Where are we going next? It was just like a very calm, automatic, matter of fact. All right, where are we going next? Nobody got really overly flustered over it, even when the customer was screaming at us because it was insanely expensive for them. But as a process, these engineers became really good at, all right, this happened. All right, what's our response? And we would as an infantryman in the Army, we had these things called battle drills, and those are things that you just kind of knew and you did automatically. So we kind of created these. Hey, what's the drill when this happens? What's the drill when this happens? What's the drill when that happens? Goes back to what Frank is talking about having those rehearsals and having those plans. Hey, if this happens, here, what's our thought? And having those, all in advance. Hey, what do we do if this supplier runs out? So, having those things when it's not disruptive builds that mindset. So, any ideas like how do we model this then as a leader? How about Mandy? How about you? What are your thoughts? How do we model this kind of behavior as a leader?
I think you just try to stay calm and lead by example.
Yeah, we have to remember that our organization as a leader, everybody's always looking at us, always looking at us. And you shouldn't shy away from that. We accept that as a challenge and as a responsibility. But yeah, if we panic and we get frustrated and we're flying and we're making bad decisions, and the rest of the organization is going to follow that example. If we're calm and if we say, okay, got it, here's what we're doing, and and we work through that. We talked a little bit about this earlier. I think Yana and Renee kind of hit on this one a little bit here. Making it safe for people. What are the things that we as a leader can do to help make it safe for people? And Yana, I'll give you first crack at this because you covered this one a little bit earlier. What do we do as a leader to make it safe for people?
Well, we've tried to let our employees have that open dialogue with us because first of all, we don't know what they're going through. So they need to inform us so we have that open communication for them to let us know what is safe, what is not safe for them. Um, and then once we find out that information, then we try to put in our resources that we have. We have a lot of resources here at the state. So we try to lead and guide them to those resources. And if they have any type of questions or need an additional outreach, we try to guide them through those things just to make them feel safe and secure and that we are supporting them along the way. So we just have that open communication. And then once we have that open communication and then the employees see themselves safe, then we can see the results. They trust us more, and then you start seeing the productivity. They start to be open more with us. So that's what we try to do here.
Awesome, Amelia, what you got for us?
So I think this is a big one, and I first saw it on a movie where somebody was getting laid off, but I've experienced it through grief. When somebody's grieving, I experienced it through my own layoff. I think it's so, so important not to take someone else's problem, disruption, situation and make it your own. I was very frustrated myself when I'm the one getting laid off and everybody else was so upset. I found myself trying to calm them down. And I'm like, look, I don't need to be calming you down. And a friend who recently lost her child was in the same situation. People were coming to her sobbing and crying, and she's processing her own grief. So don't take that upon yourself and turn it around. Let your people that you're leading experience what they need to experience, and don't make it about you.
So don't do it on their behalf.
Yeah.
All right. I like that perspective. Thank you. Yeah, now change is happening. That's always going to be the case, but in the disruption, sometimes we need to take an appetite suppressant and be the kind of the try to the best extent possible balance the pace of change and make sure that we're using smart change management and recognize that people don't necessarily resist change. They resist change happening to them. So don't make change to them or try to minimize it. So a couple of things we think about. We talked a little bit about, communication. Remind a couple of things that we've done, like full leadership lunches on these things, but just a couple of key ideas as we think about, the systematic approach to communication, making sure that we understand what our intent is, that the world is disruptive on its own and it gets filtered and doesn't come through clearly. And then everything goes really haywire once it hits people's brains and they start interpreting it for themselves. So just making sure that closing that loop aspect and making sure that when we're communicating, it's not just about what did I say, but what did they hear? Doesn't matter what you said. It's about making sure you understand what they heard. And that also creates that safety, that creates that listening impact, and that makes sure that they got the right story, not whatever story they made up in their heads. So always think about that and how we're communicating and making sure that message sent equals message received and that that's what they got. If you think about, you know, any of this disruption, it's all change. It's all, think about all of our functions of change management. This is one model of change management. John Cotter's kind of model of it, but think about involving people, think about over communicating, think about involving as many people as you can and getting their buy-in and understanding what their challenges are. Even if you can't satisfy them, at least let people be heard so that you understand what their frustrations are, and you can be like, okay, I got it. We're still doing this. I know that's not what you want, but this is why we're still doing it anyway and why it benefits the group as a whole. And finding those wins and celebrating those wins, that's a critical aspect of it, and how we make sure that the changes are positive and they stick. We hadn't talked about this yet, but one of the critical aspects of dealing with these disruptions really well is as a leader having some good emotional intelligence and really being able to process those, think about where you're at, what you're doing, where other people are at, and then not only understanding those, but then how are we managing those effectively? And then let's talk a little bit about how we make decisions. So oftentimes when things get stressful, people they pull back decision-making authority. And the easiest example is, well, let's say when budgets are tight, what's the first thing that we often do? We withhold authority on who can make decisions or hiring decisions. I know that, Jordan, that's always kind of a frustration in your organization, is hiring decisions are withheld at such a high level that it's hard to make timely and quick decisions in hiring. Hopefully that gets a little better for you. But we think about the spectrum of making decisions. We can decide ourselves, or we can delegate it completely to somebody else, or there's anything in the middle of it there. I think that it becomes important is that we're thinking about the right place to make decisions. And my general belief is that if we push the decisions down to where the information is, then we're going to get better decisions. But I'd love to hear anybody else's thoughts on decision making during times of disruption. Don, you just joined us on there. I'll let you jump right in there.
Oh, wow. I just came from a meeting where we're trying to make a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
And so the problem is when we bring it down to the different or more the membership or the group, if as you've illustrated here, it becomes very challenging to make some of those decisions. It slows a lot of things down. You want that balance of feel like everybody's having an opportunity for input, but at some point there's some things that have to be decided, and at the expense of maybe having everybody included. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Getting the right people involved and what that looks like. A couple of leadership things that we're thinking a little bit about. Recognize that during times of disruption, there'll be a lot of conflict. And anybody that's listened to me very much understands that I think conflict can be a great thing. I don't shy away from it. But as we think about, we have to lead effectively through a conflict and not just, let it tear us apart. Disagreements are great things. Heated discussions, as long as we're respectful with them, some good outcomes can come from those. I don't want to live in a place or in an environment in a world where everybody thinks the same. There's no real room for growth when that happens. but thinking about let's lead through this. Let's figure out what are wins for people. Let's think about focusing on, the interests and not the position. Don't get stuck on what we want to do, but what are we really trying to accomplish? What's the big picture? Dignity and respect are always critical. What are the criteria that we're going to make our decisions based upon? Sometimes I like to say, let's decide how we're going to decide before we decide what to decide. Because oftentimes we have different lenses and different criteria, and different people are arguing, and they're all right because they have a different criteria. They're looking at it differently. So if we decide on the criteria first, then that can help us out. And then being a little bit creative. But recognize that disruption is going to cause conflict. Yep. Going to happen. It's inevitable. Has to. We want it to. That's how we're going to grow. So those are basically some of the kind of key thoughts. Kind of open it up for some other ideas or questions or any other key aspects on, how else we lead through some of this conflict and this disruption. Frank, how about you? Some other thoughts, because it sounds like you've had a lot of it lately.
Yeah. And I've, it's so I think the approach for decision making, that's as leaders and managers, that's what we get paid to do, right? We make decisions, and I do that myself in a very analytical way, in that, I go back to stuff like the OODA loop and things like that, where, okay, I look at what the truth is and what's real for us. And then we kind of dissect the emotion out of things and try to look at things factually, and then look at the risks and outcome of the decision. And then once we evaluate that, usually everybody comes to a clear decision. So, because they're like, I don't want to take the responsibility of taking that risk, but we can do this and it's okay. And we can accept that in this decision making process. And then you can get consensus. I don't necessarily like groupthink, because I think you get bogged down in that. But so leaders need to make decisions, but I think they need to make informed decisions. Being in IT, part of our life is to provide information to people so they can make proper decisions. So,
yeah. And for the rest of the group that doesn't know the term, Reader's Digest version, what's an OODA loop?
yeah. Oh, OODA loop.
Yeah.
Observe, orient, decide, and act. And there's different parts of that. So you observe, you identify the fact that you're having a problem, you orient to that problem, and then you have to decide what you're going to do about the problem, and then you act upon that decision. So, and it kind of simplifies it. And I worked with Sergeant Major Paul Howell, and he was like, the faster you get through that loop, the more successful you're going to be, both in life and in business, so.
Perfect. Just want to make sure that there's probably most of the people doesn't recognize that acronym or initialism, I guess, actually. So, all right. Good deal. So it's kind of the last I got on there for our discussion on here. We always do this leadership lunch first Wednesday of every month. I appreciate everybody kind of here. I will throw up one more poll real quick. If there's anything that you'd like to kind of learn a little bit more about, or anything I can help you with, love helping people and helping people build these leadership skills so that when this disruption comes, then, we're much better leaders and we're ready to influence this. So a couple of program grads in the group here, and one of them that just left. But if there's something that I can do, please let me know, and I'll kind of stick around here and we can chat. Or if you guys got things to get going, then go be disruptive in a positive way.
Thanks for hosting this, Ken.
All right, Jordan, thanks for
Thank
joining.
you.
Appreciate your input.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Always enjoy it.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, I hadn't seen you on here for a little while. It was great to see you again.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty busy these days. I didn't think I would go back to work for somebody else, but I got a call from Fort Bend County and going to go do some work for them.
All
And
right.
then we're starting up our own company with a bunch of ex Harris County folks in IT. So got a lot going on.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. But it's always good to see you.
Yep, you too. Thanks, Frank. Renee, when's your change start?
I'm done March 16th.
Okay. So you got what, 5
So I
weeks
got
or
a little
so?
bit of time. Yeah, I got a little bit of time. Yep. So I'm just working on getting my program up and going, besides a couple other things, but my main program that I'm going to be putting out there. So
Well, I'm
it's
excited.
going to be interesting. I'm excited too. I was
So-
just like, they were like, we really want you to come to New Jersey. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not for me. They're like, you don't have to make up your mind right now. I'm like, no, I made up my mind already. That's a no.
I've already made up my mind, and the answer is no. I'm not going to New Jersey.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
excited. I'm really excited to be able to
Yep.
do some other things.